This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Haba, welcome everyone. So we only have a few shiurim before Rosh Hashanah, before the Yom Adin, Haba Aleinu L'Taiva. So I want to speak about a very interesting subject. It's something that piqued my curiosity for already now, this is the second year. And last year I wasn't sure, should I do it, should I not do it? What do you learn from it? Does it have a lesson even? But I think there's a lot that we can learn from this subject. And aside from the fact it's a very interesting topic. The Ramah brings down in Siman Taf Kuf Pei Gimel Sif Aleph, V'yesh oichlem rimoinim. There are those who the night of Rosh Hashanah they eat pomegranates v'oimrim, and they say narbe zechuyos karimoin. We should have a lot of mitzvahs like the rimoin. Presumably that means that the rimoin has a lot of seeds. After all, we know the rimoin has a lot of seeds. So we daven, Rebbeinu Shalom, we hope to have a lot of mitzvahs this year, as many mitzvahs as the seeds of the rimoin. Here's the question. And I'm going to share with you now the question of Rabbi Vadia Yosef. This is a question Rabbi Vadia asked his Rabbi when he was a very young boy. And it's also the question of the Pri Chadash, a very interesting question. And then we're going to add on top of that the question of the Shagas Aryeh. So it's going to start off in a lamdish way, but then it's going to segue into a very interesting subject. There's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Pasuk says in Parak Daled Pasuk Gimel, Kechut Hashani Sifsei Sayach, like a red string are your lips. Umidbarech Naver, your words are pleasant. Kipelach Harimain Rakasech, your cheeks are like slices of pomegranates. Now, literally, this is a very romantic expression, right? The Chassan is depicting the beauty of his kala. But we know Shir Hashirim is an allegory of that our husband, so to speak, is Hashem, and we're the kala. And Hashem is saying that our cheeks are ruddy like the pomegranate. So what does that mean? What does it mean our cheeks are ruddy like the pomegranate? We're about to see. Says the Gemara in Brachos. Now, this is an excellent shir, especially if you're in business. This is the best possible shir you could hear. Because chances are, tonight you're going to go home, and if you have any dreams, you're going to dream pomegranates. And if you dream about a pomegranate, it's a very good siman for business. The Gemara says in Brachos on Daf Nun Zayin, if you see pomegranates in a dream, so if it's a small pomegranate, that means your business will be successful and proliferate like a pomegranate. If it's a big pomegranate, your business will expand like a pomegranate. So it's a good thing before you go to sleep, instead of counting sheep, count seeds, and it will be a good sign for a business. If you see a half a pomegranate, if you're a Talmid Chacham, anticipate a lot of chidushim. If you're an Am Ha'aretz, anticipate the opportunity for mitzvahs. And then the Gemara says something very interesting. Shenemar kipelach harimain rakasech, like a slice of a pomegranate are your cheeks. My rakasech, afilu reikanin shabach, even the emptiest Jews, Meleim mitzvahs karimain, are full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Even the emptiest Jews, even the lowest Jews, even the biggest bum, is full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Well, Frekt Rabbi Vadia Yosef, a very interesting question. If even the biggest bum is full of mitzvahs like the pomegranate, so what exactly are we mispal for the night of Rosh Hashanah? Hashem, please, we hope we have a lot of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. So basically we're asking Hashem, Shkayach, we're not even like the biggest bum. We hope we should be on the madrega of the lowest Jew who has as many mitzvahs as a pomegranate. Well, what kind of request is that? If even the average Jew, not even the average Jew, the emptiest Jew, the Jew who's on empty, right? His tank is running low. Even he is full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Then why would we ask Hashem, go for it. Why would we ask Hashem, narbe mitzvahs karimain, we should have as many mitzvahs as a rimain? Everyone has many mitzvahs as a rimain. I mean, it's perforce. Even the lowest person has many mitzvahs as a rimain. This is the question Rabbi Vadia Yosef asked his Rabbi when he was a young boy. By the way, look at number 4. This is the kasha of the Pri Chadash. Pri Chadash asks, Ein lahakshos mehada amrinon bebrachos. By the way, it's a Gemara in Brachos Nun Zayin. Where else is this Gemara? It's a Gemara in Erevin Yotes. It's a Gemara in Chagiga Chav Zayin. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin Lamed Zayin. It's a Gemara in at least 4 places that it says even the lowest Jew, even the emptiest Jew, even a Jew, who the whole Sunday, from early morning, even before 1 o'clock, is, already preparing and doing achanas. And even after the latest review of the latest game is still chazering over the events of the day, even they are full of mitzvahs like a remind. So what are we asking for in Rosh Hashanah? That's the kasha Rabbi Vadia, that's the kasha of the Pri Chadash. Okay.
Why is Zechiyas, why is the Rabbi translating it strictly as mitzvahs?
Mitzvahs, Zechiyas. Zechiyas are merits.
Other translations for that.
Okay, we'll stick with the simple translation for now. Mitzvahs. By the way, let's add another question here. And the other question is, the Gemara Megillah. Says the Gemara Megillah on Davav. The Gemara is quoting a pasuk, and the pasuk says very interesting names for different cities in Eretz Yisrael. It says, Ela Amar Rabba, Chamas, the city of Chamas, Zu Chame Gerar, Rekes Zu Tiveria. Rekes is Tiveria. Why is Tiveria called Rekes? Very interesting. Everybody knows Tiveria. Who's buried in Tiveria? Rabbi Akiva, the Ramchal. But it has another name. The Gemara says Rekes is a name for Tiveria. V'lama nikra shema Rekes. Says the Gemara, Sha'afilu reikonin sheba malayin mitzvahs karimain. That in Tiveria, even the lowest Jew, even the emptiest Jew, is Rekes. He's full of mitzvahs like a rimain. So comes the Shagas Aryeh, comes the great Goin, Reb Leib, Rashiva of Mitz, right? The Shagas Aryeh. He says, what you're calling Tiveria Rekes, because even the lowest Jew in Tiveria has so many mitzvahs like a rimain. What are you talking about? The Gemara just said in Brachas that every single Jew, even the emptiest Jew, has as many mitzvahs as a rimain. So why would you specifically call Tiveria Rekes? Because the emptiest Jew in Tiveria is full of mitzvahs like a rimain. Every Jew in the world is full of mitzvahs like the rimain. What's so special about Tiveria? Okay, so let's go back to the first question. Again, the first question is, what are we davening for the night of Rosh Hashanah? That Ribbon Shalom make us full of mitzvahs like a rimain. Every last Jew is full of mitzvahs like a rimain. So the Pri Chadash answers, and by the way, Rabbi Vadia says this is the answer he gave his Rabbeim, that when the Gemara says that even the lowest Jew is full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate, that means over the course of their lifetime, from the time they're born until they go, until their last day, they end up doing as many mitzvahs like a rimain. But what we're davening for the night of Rosh Hashanah is Ribbon Hashem. This year, we want to be able to do as many mitzvahs as the rimain. Meaning, even the lowest Jew, throughout the course of their entire life, will do as many mitzvahs as the rimain. What we're mispalo for the night of Rosh Hashanah is Ribbon Hashem. This year, Yiratzon Shechadesh Aleinu Shana Zu Shenarbe Zechuyos Karimain B'Shana Zu. But that still doesn't answer the Shagas Aryeh's question. What does the Gemara mean that in Rekes, that in Tiveria, even the emptiest Jews are full of mitzvahs like a rimain? Everywhere in the world, they're as full of mitzvahs as a rimain. So very interestingly, the Chida is an amazing thing. Chida wrote a commentary on Shas called Pesach Einayim. And the Chida says, you won't believe it. I saw the latest release. The latest release was the Goin, Reb Leib, Rashiva of Mitz, just put out a Soifer on Shas called Turei Even. We look at it as like 200 years old, the classic, a Shagas Aryeh. The Chida's writing, you wouldn't believe it, I was just in this farm store, I just went to Central Avenue, and this great new Soifer, Turei Even on Shas. And I didn't even have it. A guest who passed through my house had the Soifer, and I looked at it, and he asked this question, why would we call Tiveria Rekes? Every last Jew has many mitzvahs as a rimain. So comes a Chida like this. Says a Chida, when we say that even the empty Jews are full of mitzvahs like a rimain, it doesn't mean every single Jew. It means most Jews. Ruba Kakula. 90% of Jews. There are going to be 10% of Jews who, they don't have any mitzvahs. Now, it could be that in some cities, all the Jews have mitzvahs like a rimain. And it could be in some cities, none of the Jews have any mitzvahs. But in the overall scheme of things, most Jews in the world have as many mitzvahs as a rimain. There are going to be a minority of Jews who don't have any mitzvahs. What's special about Tiveria is in Tiveria, everyone in Tiveria, or at least most of the people in Tiveria, are molei mitzvahs karimain. In other words, it could be you go to Eilat, not saying that today, but back then, it could be nobody had any mitzvahs. But most Jews everywhere were molei mitzvahs karimain. And but not every single Jew. So says the Chida, but in Tiberia, every Jew was malei mitzvahs like a reminder. So now you ask, so like what was going on in Tiberia that everybody was so malei mitzvahs? So you remember the Gemara says on Shabbos, Tiberia is in a valley. So since it's in a valley, the sun seems to set earlier than in other places because you lose sight of the sun quicker. Mamela, they were makabel Shabbos earlier than other people. Says the Chida, certainly on the outtake, they were also machmer to keep the zman like anybody else. In other words, on the intake, they took in Shabbos earlier, but on the outtake, they didn't let go of Shabbos earlier than anybody else. Says the Chida, there's a klal that Ashrei Enosh Yasa Zois Uven Adam Yachas Likba Shomer Shabbos Mechalaloi V'Shomer Yodam Yatzis Korah. The Gemara Darshans Kol HaShomer Shabbos Kil Chasoi Afilu Oived Avodah Zarah Kedar Enosh Moichel Lai. That if somebody has a schus of Shmir Shabbos, Hashem is Moichel their Averos. So therefore, says the Chida, in Tiberia, where they were very medakdek on Shmir Shabbos, they took the Shabbos in early. They let it go out late. Mamela, that was Moichel their Averos. Therefore, in Tiberia, every last Jew was Malei Mitzvahs Karimain. Elsewhere, it was just the majority of Jews. But there's some cities, maybe it was everyone. Some cities, nobody. But Tiberia, because they were medakdek on Kabbalah Shabbos, therefore they were all Malei Mitzvahs Karimain. Says the Chida from the Ari, an amazing thing. The Gemara tells us the Shechina had 10 exiles. What was the last exile of the Shechina? Where was the last place the Shechina was before it left? Tiberia. Where will the Shechina return to before it goes back to the third base Hamikdash? Tiberia. What's the pshat? Because since Ein Yisrael Nigalen Ela B'Schos Shabbos, and Tiberia was the most zahir in Kabbalah Shabbos, therefore they maintained the Shechina the longest, and they will be the first to restore the coming of the Shechina. This is how the Chida approaches this subject. Still does not answer the question, so what are we davening for the night of Rosh Hashanah? Nir bezachiyos karimain, so what are we asking for? I guess then we would be asking, well, we don't want to be like the 10% who are not Malei Mitzvahs, at least let us be like the Ruba of Klal Yisrael that are Malei Mitzvahs karimain. Okay. Rabbi Vadia has another approach over here, and then he writes he found a number of other svarim. And that is like this. If you look carefully at the tefillah, we say, Narbe zechuya is karimain, we want to increase our merits like a remind. What part of the remind? Doesn't say. Now, if you look in the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, that says, Afilu reikanin shebecha malei mitzvahs karimain, it says, Kipelech harimain rakasech. What does the word pelech mean? Pelech means a slice of a remind. Says Rabbi Vadia, when we say even the empty Jews are malei mitzvahs, they're only malei mitzvahs as many seeds are in a slice of a remind. Kipelech harimain rakasech, the empty Jews have as many zechusim as the slice of the remind. When we're davening the night of Rosh Hashanah, Ribbon Shalom, narbe zechuya is karimain, we're davening, we want to have zechusim like the entire remind. The entire remind is a lot more than just one slice. Says Rabbi Vadia, that answers the Shagas Aryeh's question. Shagas Aryeh wanted to know, what's so special about Tiberia? Tiberia is called Rekes, because even the empty Jews are full of mitzvahs like a remind, but every last Jew is full of mitzvahs like a remind. The answer is no, every last Jew is only full of mitzvahs like a slice of a remind. But in Tiberia, there were malei mitzvahs like the entire remind. Now here's where it gets fun. Comes the Chasam Soifer, in the Drashas Chasam Soifer, and the subject of the remind is a focus of the writings of the Chasam Soifer. And the Chasam Soifer first starts off by saying, on the fourth line, look at number 9, B'sheyadua, right, Rabbi? So let's just take a poll here. How many seeds do you think are in a remind? 600. Ezra says 600. Azriel says 613. Yitzi says they're all different. Where did you get 613? Does it say that anywhere? Does it say anywhere that there are 613 seeds in a remind? Says the Chasam Soifer, look on the fourth line, B'sheyadua, it is known. Ki harimain yesh by tarya garinim. that a Riman has 613 seeds, neged taryag mitzvahs. Now the Chassam Soifer says a very interesting thing. If you actually cut open a Riman, which I did a lot of in preparation for the Shiur, and I'm going to show you the evidence.
Everyone has exactly 6.
If you cut open a Riman, now I'm not going to tell you whether in my papers over here there's any information on exactly how many seeds are in the Rimanim in Queens, in the 5 towns. It depends where you get them. I'm not saying that where you buy them has any reflection on the way the people act in that place. I will tell you the facts, okay?
What size? No?
The size. We'll see. One thing you know is that if I'm going to give a share on a subject, I try to do my due diligence, right? Okay. So, Chassam Soifer writes, it's Yadua. It is known that the Riman has 613 seeds. Now, the Chassam Soifer says like this. If you ever open up a Riman, which I'm sure you do every Rosh Hashanah, you'll notice there's a seed. Now, the seed is inside a sack. There's a sack. There are a lot of... inside is juice. Inside the juice is the seed, yeah? You know what I'm talking about? You saw the picture on the email, right? Did anyone here see the picture on the email? It's a nice picture, right? Right? So those little buds, that's not the seed. There's a sack. In the sack is juice. How do you say the juice in Lashon HaKodesh? Asis. And inside is the garin. There's like a bubble, right? A bubble. You know when you put it in your mouth and you pop, it like bursts. It bursts open. There's juice in there. It's almost as if they're like these little fruits inside of the Riman. Inside the sack of juice is the seed. Chassam Soifer is saying there are 613 seeds in the Riman. Well, says Chassam Soifer, it depends. Because if you cut open the Riman and you slice it, then basically what you're doing is you're going to be slicing into these bubbles. The juice is going to come out. Then you're left with the seeds. But if you keep the Riman and you peel it, so then the bubbles are going to be intact, and they're going to be full of juice. Well, says Chassam Soifer like this. The kasha of the Shagas Aryeh. Amazingly, Chassam Soifer and the Drashas quotes the Shagas Aryeh's question. That what's so special about Tiveria? Tiveria, they're Malay Mitzvahs Kariman. Every last Jew is Malay Mitzvahs Kariman. No, the answer is like this. Every last Jew has the seed. The seed is the mitzvah. But they're kepelech harimain. What's a pelech? A slice. A little different than what Rabbi Vadi was saying. Some source says like this. When you're mifaleach the riman, you cut it, the juice is going to squirt out. All you're going to have is a seed. The seeds are the mitzvahs. Well, if the seed is the mitzvahs, then what's that sack of juice called? That's the Torah. Now, Marav Rabbi say, Avada, every single Jew is malei mitzvahs karimain. Meaning every Jew has mitzvahs. We put on talis, we put on tefillin, but Marav Rabbi say, sorry for the expression, that's balabatish. It's not good enough to be balabatish. Yeah, I do the mitzvahs. Why did I do this? I once heard somewhere. What do you mean you once heard somewhere? How do you know? Where did you hear? You heard? Oh, I'm not sure. I heard it I saw it in Mishpacha in an ad. Nothing against Mishpacha. I saw it in a different magazine. Where do you see it? In some advertisement for a cheesecake on Shavuos. Yeah, but you know where it is in the Shulchan Aruch? You know what the Mishnah Berurah says? You know what it says in the Gemara? Nah, it's a certain mahalach. I just do the mitzvahs. But I'm not educated. I don't understand. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know the Gemara. I don't know Shulchan Aruch. I don't know the Torah. I don't have a deep understanding and a vast understanding of the sources. It's like everything is hearsay. I once heard, I once saw. Nobody does it. Everybody does it. How could you do this? Nobody does that. How could you not do this? Everybody does that. It's like, it's called street Judaism. Whatever, the Welt. Who's the Welt? Nevardik, they would say. The Welt. The Welt are a bunch of Meshugayim, Chaylim, Fardarbana people. We don't care what the Welt does. What is the halacha? What does the Torah say? So it's like this. Says Chassam Soifer, Avada, the lowest Jew, is Malei, Mitzvahs, Karimain. That's the Garinim of the Rimain. But when we're Mispalel, in Tiveria, they were Marbe Zechusim, like the Rimain Shalem, with the juice inside. Meaning, they were Balei Torah. They didn't just put on tefillin. They knew what the Shulchan Aruch says, the exact makam, the exact kavana, the exact dikduke halacha, meaning they were balei Torah, they weren't just balei mitzvahs. It's not good enough to be balei mitzvahs. If that's all you could do, that's all you could do. But that's not what we're shooting for. We're not shooting for, watered down Judaism. We're not shooting for reikanim shebecha, malei mitzvahs karimai. You want to do things properly. You want to understand it. You want to have knowledge. You want to have yedias haTorah. You want to be connected to the Torah, not only the mitzvahs, not just the garin. You want to be juicy. You want to be a regular Jew, or you want to be a juicy Jew? What we're mispalo for the night of Rosh Hashanah is narbe zechuyois karimain, not just the seeds, but the juice. We want to have all the flavor, all the tam. How many people? Tell you what, we daven sheniya l'rosh v'lo l'zanav. We should be the head and not the tail. What's wrong with being the tail? What's an afkamina? You have a train. You have the head of the train, and you have the back of the train. What's the difference? They all moving at the same speed? No. The front train has the engine in it. So it could move whether the tail is there or is not there. It's independently moving. It's constantly invigorated. It has its own source of movement. The back tail, it's only moving because it's being dragged along. Most people in this world, everyone comes to Shacharis. Everyone comes to here. And if nobody comes to Shacharis, then I don't come. If nobody does, it's all about what does everybody do. And you know what? What we're davening for is we should be the Rosh. We want to do things because that's what we want to do. Most of the time also, we become the zanav of ourselves. Yeah, I go to Minyan. Why? Because since when I was 20, I decided to go to Minyan, so I'm just being dragged along by what I used to do. It's not that every morning I wake up, I want to wake up and serve Hashem and thank Hashem that I'm alive and be oived Hashem. No, I'm a zanav. I'm the zanav of me. I made a decision to do a certain thing and I just get schlepped along. So that's what we're responding for. We don't want to just be the seed. We want to be a juicy Jew. Yeah, we heard it here first. A new expression. We want to be a juicy Jew. Okay. So Rabbi said, but let's talk about this subject. To me, it was a very interesting subject. The Soifer says it's yadua that a rimoin has 613 seeds. So I have one question. To me, if somebody says something is yadua, I want to know, no, where? Where does it say? Now, if it was a Gemara, Soifer, I guarantee would quote the Gemara. If it was a medrash, Soifer would quote the medrash. So what does the Soifer mean? It's yadua. Interesting. It's almost incredible. The primary source that a rimoin has 613 seeds seems to be a malbim. There's no Gemara, there's no Bavli, Yushalmi, Rashi, Tosfos, there's no Tosefta, Mechilta, Sifri. The malbim on Shir Hashirim writes, the rimoin b'chol ha-sefer, Yermois al taryag mitzvos. The rimoin in Sefer Shir Hashirim alludes to the 613 mitzvahs, like the number of seeds in the rimoin. So the Malbim lived in the 1860s. I think he was nifter in 1880. The Malbim is the one. What? Yeah, but I'll show you what I mean. Some Soifer just writes it's yadua. It's known. The Malbim seems to be the one who definitively says that the Rimoin has 613 seeds. I'll explain why I'm using the Malbim for this. The Malbim writes, the Rimoin in Kol Sefer Shir Hashirim is maramis to the Taryag mitzvahs. Or, take a look at number 11. Later in Shir Hashirim, the pasuk says, En hagcha, aviacha, I will guide you, I'll bring you, I'll beis imi to my mother's house, tilamadeni, you'll teach me, ashkecha meyayin arekach, I'll give you to drink from the spiced wine, me'asis rimoini, from the juice of my rimoin. Again, zok the malbim, kepelach harimoin, mole taryag garinen. And the Malbim writes in Parshas Tetzaveh, on the me'il of the Kohen Gadol, it was pamoin zahav rimoin, pamoin zahav rimoin. The Malbim says the rimoin is merames to the 613 mitzvahs, because we know that a rimoin has 613 seeds. The Malbim does not write shamati or it's yadua. He just says, as a matter of fact, that the rimoin has 613 seeds. And we're going to see, I'm just going to show you very quickly, there are many, many svarim that bring this idea that a Rimon has 613 seeds, and nobody quotes any Makar. For example, I'm sure everybody heard of the Me'am Loes on Chumash from Rabbi Yaakov Kuli, but on Shiur HaShirim, it was written by others. In Shiur HaShirim, the Yalkut Me'am Loes says that why Kipelach Hariman Rakasech? He says something very interesting. We say Kipelach Hariman Rakasech, that even the emptiest Jew is full of seeds, is full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Why is that? Here you have a Jew, he's an Amaretz Gomer, he doesn't do any mitzvahs. Why is he full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate? So he says the next part of the pasuk is Mibad Litzamasech, which means because we're all connected, meaning once you are part of Klal Yisrael, if you're part of the greater Klal Yisrael, then everybody reaps the rewards of the Klal. So if you have some Jews who do the mitzvahs, and everybody else is part of the Klal, they also reap the benefits of all 613 mitzvahs. So says the Yalkut Me'am Loes, and therefore, ulefizeh, nachayin masha'oimrim, it's correct, that which they say, that a Rimon has 613 seeds. Who's they? He doesn't say it's a Gemara, he doesn't say it's a Medrash. He says they, it's correct, that which they say, that a Rimon has 613 seeds.
If this is correct, why didn't the Ramah bring this down? That the Rimon has 613 mitzvahs.
You mean, why didn't the Ramah say, Narber Zchuyas Karimon, because the Rimon has 613? Maybe you'll say in the, back in the time of the Ramah, it was obvious. Yeah. What? Okay, good. So I'm going to show you what I came up with, okay? I'm going to show you a few more Maramakoimais. Says there's a Sefer HaMasechta on Shas called Zichron Soifer from the descendants of the Chassam Soifer. He says, V'gam shagur b'fi ha'olam. What does shagur b'fi ha'olam mean? It's common parlance. Everybody says that a Rimon is 600. So again, the Chassam Soifer said Yodua. Yalkut Me'am Loes says Mashe'oimrim. The Zichron Soifer says Shagur b'fi chol ha'olam. Maram Shik just says it's known Doimel Rimon v'lei nimtzu boi rak tarya garinim. Look in the Arugas Haboisem. Arugas Haboisem says Nirel v'yasaiti al pima sheyodua. It's known. All these expressions, Yodua, Sheyodua, Mashe'oimrim, Shagur b'fi chol ha'olam. And here's a good one. By the way, the Eitz Yosef, that's number 18, is the Eitz Yosef on the Medrash Rabbah. He quotes the Sefer Shiur LeDavid, that the Shiur LeDavid said, I saw an amazing thing in Sfarim. Which Sefer? What did he see? That a Rimon has 613 seeds. Pella. There's... What? Oh, okay. So right, he says it could be, meaning he thinks it says it in a medrash. What do you mean? You think? Where's the medrash?
Where's the door with Pella? Why isn't it door with Pella?
It's a tremendous thing. It's an amazing thing.
All these other people said it before him. So what kind of Pella? It's not. You haven't heard of all these other.
I don't know. He didn't have all this farm that we have access to. Mar Rabbi, so here's the last one for now. Yeah, here's the last one. There's a kuntress called Tarshabappa, who also he brings Shamati. I heard. Where'd you hear it? Who told you? No evidence. Here's the story. That the Vilna Gaon once told one of his Talmidim, and his Talmud went to Italy. Again, this had nothing to do with anything. His student was going to Italy, and he said, going to Italy, bring me back a Rimon. So he brings him back a Rimon, and the Vilna Gaon rips open the Rimon. And he starts to count the seeds of the Rimon. And unbelievable, the Vilna Gaon counted exactly 613 seeds in the Rimon. Now, why in 200 years since the Vilna Gaon, this story did not appear anywhere until somebody 10 years ago wrote, he heard. I mean, he heard. Who did he hear it from? I don't know. He heard. There's a story. So there's a lot of mystery about where it comes from. Are there 613 seeds? But the question is, do Chazal say it or Chazal? Now, if Chazal say it, then that's part of our emunah. If Chazal don't say it, so it could be there's some type of Messiah. So I found, look at number 20, there's a sefer, Shaila Sechuvas Yad Chanoich, from Chanoich Henoch Meyer Misasav. Uma sha'oimrim sharimoin yesh loy tarya garinim Lo imatzasiv b'divrei Chazal. It's not found in Chazal. So you say, I don't know. There are a lot of midrashim that they discovered recently. Maybe this Yad Chanuch did not have access to all the midrashim. If there's anyone alive who knows every single statement that's found in Chazal, it's got to be Reb Chaim Kanievsky. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky wrote a perush on Parak Shira. A Parak Shira is a medrash. It's a Yalkut Shemaini, and the list all the shirais that everything in the Bria sings to Hashem. So the question is what does the Remain sing to Hashem? So in Parak Shira it says the Remain sings to Hashem Kepelach Harimain Rakosech Mibad L'Tzamasech. Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, in a Remain there's 613 seeds. What's the Makar? Now if Reb Chaim Kanievsky is telling you the Makar, that means this is the only Makar and this is the best Makar. Says Reb Chaim Kimashe Kosav Hagoin Malbim. So you'll ask, why did he quote the Malbim? There are other Achronim that say it also. L'char, it's because the Malbim was the greatest one. Why is that? So first of all, in the Brisker world, they say there are three Achronim that have a din of a Rishon. The Vilna Gaon, Avada Reb Chaim Brisker, and the Malbim. In fact, the Beis Halevi said that the Malbim wrote his Perush Beruach HaKodesh. So it could be, the Chafetz Chaim supposedly, or the Chafetz Chaim writes, and not supposedly, Chafetz Chaim writes in the Hakdama to Taras Koyanim, that there are certain halakim of Torah and certain approaches in Torah that are not even for him, it's only for Gedolei Yisrael, like the Malbim. So if in the eyes of the Chafetz Chaim, who's a Gadol? The Malbim. That's the example he gives. That's why Reb Chaim quotes the Malbim. But I guarantee you, there is no Chazal that says that Riman has 613. Because if there was a Chazal, you could be sure Reb Chaim Kanievsky would have quoted it. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, what do you think? He learns all day long. Unless he has very chashuv a guess, he's learning all day long. So if the Reb Chaim Kanievsky says that there's 613 seeds, like the Malbim says, that means the Malbim's the only Makar. He says Reb Chaim, but some Rimaynim have less than 613 seeds. He says it could be, yes, but its max number of seeds in a Remain is 613. And the fact that a Remain will not have more than 613 seeds teaches you that the Rebbeinu Shalom is trying to show Klal Yisrael that even the emptiest Jew will have at least 613 mitzvahs like a Remain. But what do we see from all of this? L'chaira, that there is no Makar in Chazal, that there are 613 seeds in a Remain, and the Makar, or at least the strongest Makar, are the words of the Malbim. Maybe the Malbim had a tradition from his Rabbi, Reb Tzvi Hersh Miziditchev, or from others.
He says.
By the way, yeah?
He says, Ein pochas mitaria k'moshe
there's not. Chazal say they at least have as many mitzvahs as seeds in the Remain. But that the Remain has 613, that it doesn't say in Chazal. So if you look very briefly, in number 22, number 22 is the Sefer Lachmei Toida, the son of the Hafla. The son of the Hafla, Reb Pinchas Haros of the Hafla, his son, Reb Tzvi Hersh, writes, Al pi hayadua b'sifri, shenimsa b'Remain taryag. He says it's a Sifri. What's a Sifri? Sifri is the Tarshabappa on Bamidbar. So if that's the case, it means we have a source in Chazal. So the Megadim Chadashim says, no, there's obviously a Tas Soifer in the Sefer Lachmei Toida, because the Lachmei Toida cannot be saying it says in the Sifri that there's 613, because there is no such Sifri. It should say, Ki hayadua b'sfarim. There's a missing mem over there. It's known in the books, but there ain't no Sifri that there's 613 seeds in the Remain. Marva Rabbi Sai, we're almost there. Could be. Anything could be. You've been on this road long enough to know anything could be. Yeah. Let's see a little bit more, and then we're gonna see something very interesting. Comes a Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai says that we know in Shir Hashirim the Torah is referred to as Pardes Rimonim, an orchard of pomegranates. The question is, why an orchard of pomegranates? Why not an orchard of grapes, an orchard of figs? There are a lot of different fruits. Why an orchard of pomegranates? So says the Ben Ish Chai, because in the pomegranate are many, many, many fruits, many seeds. There are even pomegranates that have more than 613 seeds. So he says, there are pomegranates with even more than 613 seeds. Comes Megadim Chadashim, he says, that sounds like different Rimonim have different number of seeds, but he says it's hard to believe that the Rimonim that have more than 613 seeds, the Megadim Chadashim, it's a contemporary Soifer. He says, in his opinion, probably Rimonim have much less than 613 seeds. So now this is driving me crazy, because everybody's speculating how many seeds are in the Rimonim. Probably, it's assumed. I mean, the Ben Ish Chai says there are Rimonim with more than 613 seeds. So there's really only one way to find out. You got to cut them open and count the seeds. So, by the way, even though the Chassam Soifer said it's Yadua that a Rimoin has 613 seeds, in another place in his Sefer he says there are as many seeds in a Rimoin as Lavin in the Torah, 365. So that's very different than 613. By the way, the Kamarna wrote a Perush on the Zayar, and he says, in every pelech of the Rimoin, every slice of the Rimoin, there's 613 seeds. And if you count it and they're not, it's because your city is cursed. But really, a Rimoin should have in every slice 613 seeds. So there's a Gadol alive today in Eretz Yisrael. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Soifer. I think he's a descendant of Kaf Chaim. He said he spoke to many tzaddikim. He spoke to a certain Zakein Miziknei Yerushalayim who checked many, many Rimoinim. And he never found a Rimoin with 613 seeds. Says Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Soifer, I don't know what to do with that. And that's the end of it. That's how he concludes. So, you got to see for yourself. So, Marv Rabbi say, let me hand out to you what I came up with. First of all, one good thing I got out of this is I think during the summer I saved myself from a trip. I took everybody, I got all the kids together, put on gloves, we spread out a big tablecloth, and I'm going to show you the process. I had a very scientific process over here. Because if you're going to cut open the Rimoin, what are you going to do? Count 1, 2, 3. What's going to happen? You see, I'm going to forget the count, right? So you have to have a way to document exactly how many. So I made a grid. I made it, like boxes. Each paper had 144 boxes, and I put each seed in the box this way. And I took pictures of it. And I have a new technology. It's a good Gvaldiga technology. I'll tell you about it. What? Yeah. Basically, unbelievably, I bought two, one in Queens and one in the 5 towns. Now, I will tell you, one of them was Kamat double the other. Unbelievable. So one Rimoin had 517 seeds, and it took me about 25 minutes to count. And the other one had 936, and it took about 45 minutes to count. Now they were both the exact same size. Pretty much. But what's very interesting, in one of them, the seeds were juicy, they were lush, they were huge bubbles, bursting with color and flavor. And one of them were these tiny little seeds, shvacha color. So in the 5 towns, you get very juicy seeds. In Queens, you get a lot of seeds. So depending on your particular taste and flavor. Now, in terms of the price, there's also a major difference, okay? And that I don't want to talk about publicly. And that's another subject. Yeah.
So these are the actual colors?
Yeah, these are the actual colors. I was able to preserve the exact color. So I'll be honest with you, before I cut it open, I read the Megadim Chadashim. He thinks most Rimonim have much less than 613. There is a Chassam Soifer that says 365. So I was expecting to get a few hundred. The first Remind I cut open had 936 seeds. I couldn't believe it. I was floored. It was like never ending. It was never ending. And then the other one had 517. So I called today. I have a friend who put me in touch with a pomegranate grower. I don't know if that's the word, a grower. But there's a better word for in Eretz Yisrael who has orchards in Eretz Yisrael. Who he said he's been doing this his whole life. And he cut open many Reminim. And he never found one with 613 seeds. But, late breaking news, before the Shiur, a friend of mine, Mr. Heimowitz, and Dr. Penner they each bought a Remind, and Mr. Heimowitz came up with 546, and Dr. Penner came up with 575. I would assume as follows. If the Malbim says there's 613, then there's 613. Are you going to argue with the Malbim? This Remind, the Remind that Hashem, that grew in Gan Eden, the way a Remind is supposed to be, probably is supposed to be 613. Who said? The Malbim says it.
Nowadays you're all genetically modified.
Yeah, they're modified, hormones, chemicals, pesticides. But if you want to know, so like this, if Chazal would say a Remind has 613 seeds, then, it's part of the Emunah, you got to believe in it. But you should know what the Makar is. The Makar is the Malbim. But Mor V'Raboisai, to me it's an incredible thing. Listen to this. So that means really, when you're saying the Yehi Ratzon, let me just end off with a question and then we'll wrap it up. The Gemara says in Hariyos that at the beginning of the year, you should try to see Kara, Rubia, Karsi, Silka, Tamri. You should try to see leeks and fenugreek. We don't even know what these things are.
Funny Greek, a funny guy. I know.
You know a funny Greek?
Funny,
No, but I don't know if that's what it means. I think it's a type of plant. And the reason why you're supposed to look at it, the Torah says, is because rubia means a lot. And when you look at it, implicit is that you're going to have a lot of mitzvahs. The Gemara doesn't say to say Yehi Ratzon. The Gemara doesn't say to say a tefillah. The Gemara just says eat a fruit with that is called rubia. And the Torah explains rubia means a lot, meaning the message is shenar bezechuyos. Comes the Beis Yosef, that even though the Torah does not say that you say a tefillah, the Mordechai is mechadesh, that when you eat the fruit, you should offer a tefillah and say Yehi Ratzon. Fine. Amazing. The Gemara doesn't say anything about a Remind. The Gemara just says rubia, doesn't say to eat a Remind. So where does it come from to eat a Remind? So the Beis Yosef says, look in the Avudraham. The Avudraham says, also eat a Remind and say Yehi Ratzon shenir bezechuyos k'Remind. And that's what we do. Most people, they eat meren, and they say Yehi Ratzon v'nach Hashem l'keinu v'seinu she'yir b'zechuyosenu, and they eat a Remind and they say shenir bezechuyos k'Remind. By the way, the person, the Gadol who instituted eating the Remind was Rav Haigain. So here's the kasha, and we're going to say a beautiful teretz. So the kasha is, it sounds like the Yehi Ratzons are superfluous. Why would you be mispalel Yehi Ratzon she'yir b'zechuyosenu and then say shenir bezechuyos k'Remind? It seems like the exact same Yehi Ratzon. You eat meren or rubia and you say Yehi Ratzon she'yir b'zechuyosenu. Then you eat the Remind and you say shenir bezechuyos k'Remind. That's the kasha.
Same thing.
Now, if you accept the tradition of the Malbim, that there's 613 seeds in the Remind, it could be these are vastly different tefillahs. One tefillah is that whatever mitzvahs we do, let's say we do one mitzvah, let's say we're into chesed, and that's it, we don't do anything else. So the first tefillah is she'yir b'zechuyosenu. We don't want to just do chesed once, twice. We want to do that mitzvah 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 100,000 times. We're not commenting on the array or the diversity of mitzvahs. She'yir b'zechuyosenu, those mitzvahs that we do, we want them to be more and increase. But then we offer another tefillah. And the other tefillah is, Rebbe Hashem, we're only doing 10 mitzvahs, 100 mitzvahs out of the 613. Nir bezechuyos k'Remind. The Remind has 613 tefillahs, seeds. So we don't want to just do a lot of the mitzvahs that we do. We want to do all 613. Again, Rabbi say, where does the tradition come from that there's 613 seeds in the Remind? The Malbim. So it's very interesting then. Which gadol should you be thinking of when you make that Yehirat sign on the Rimain? The Malbim. Rosh Hashanah is the yard site of the Malbim. Very interesting. So maybe Hashgacha Pratis had it. That really the Yehirat sign on the Rimain is only meaningful if you accept the idea that there's 613 seats. Whose idea is this? This is the Malbim's idea. Oh. So Rebbe Shalom said, by the way, the Malbim was buried in Kiev, in a Fardarbina place. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter commented that Rebbe Shalom Hashgacha Pratis orchestrates that tzaddikim are buried in certain mekayimos, so we don't always understand. And some suggested that the Malbim was buried later where the Babi Yar massacre was. And that L'asad Lavai, when Rebbe Shalom brings the Malbim back, he's going to bring the Malbim back together with all the Yidden who were Nebuch murdered over there. But the night of Rosh Hashanah, when we make this Yiratza, and Shnir B'Zchus Karima, and don't forget the Malbim, this is the Chiddush of the Malbim, and the night of Rosh Hashanah is also the yard site of the Malbim. So, Zechusa Yagin Aleinu, we should talk about Zoicha, to have a year, Malei Mitzvahs Karimain, not just the seed with the Jews. We should be Zoicha to be Mekayim all the mitzvahs. We should be Zoicha to Mekayim them many times. We should be Zoicha not just to do the mitzvahs, but we should have the juice as well. We should be Zoicha to have a year of Limanat Torah and become tremendous Talmidei Chachamim. Have a great night.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.